Every single one of us wakes up in the morning with decisions to make. Some are small, like what to wear or what to eat. Others carry the weight of your future, like whether to take that risk. Forgive that person or step into an opportunity that scares you. And the truth is, you don't always have the answers. You don't always know what's next. And that uncertainty can make you feel stuck, anxious, or even hopeless. But here's the reality: you don't have to figure it all out on your own. There's a source of grace and wisdom available to you right now, and it comes from God. Anymore. Grace gives you the strength to face what you can't control, and wisdom gives you the clarity to make choices that align with where He's leading you. Anymore. Think about it. How many times have you rushed into something only to realize later, if I had just paused, if I had just prayed, I would have seen this more clearly? That's why starting your day with prayer matters. It's not about saying the perfect words or following a script. It's about creating space in your heart and mind for God to step in and guide you. This morning prayer is an act of surrender. It's saying, God, I don't have it all figured out, but I trust you. I trust that your grace will carry me and that your wisdom will direct me more. And when you start with that posture, you walk into your day differently. You carry peace in the middle of chaos. You make decisions with clarity instead of fear. Or you treat people with patience instead of frustration. Here's the truth. You already have everything you need for today, because God has already gone before you. You don't need to be perfect anymore. You don't need to have all the answers. What you need is the humility to ask for guidance and the faith to act on it. So today, as you step into your morning, pause and ask for grace. Anymore. Pause and ask for wisdom. Then watch how doors open, how strength shows up when you're weak, and how clarity comes in moments you thought were impossible. Grace and wisdom, that's your anchor. And more, that's your strength. And when you start your day there, you'll notice life feels less like a burden and more like a guided journey. Grace gives strength for what you can't control anymore. And wisdom gives clarity for the decisions you can. That's one of those truths that sounds simple, but when you really live it, it changes everything anymore. Because let's be honest, most of the stress in life comes from two things: the things you can't control and the choices you're afraid to make anymore. You wake up and immediately feel pulled in 10 different directions, already overwhelmed before the day even starts. You're worried about what people think, about deadlines, about relationships, about what might or might not happen tomorrow. And in that swirl of chaos, you forget something important. You're not meant to carry all of it on your shoulders. Grace is God's way of saying, I've got you. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out anymore. And you don't need to fight battles that were never yours to fight. Grace is the strength that covers your weakness, the calm that steadies your panic, the reminder that even when things feel impossible, you're not alone. Think about the times when life blindsided you. Maybe it was a loss, a setback, or a dream that crumbled. You didn't have the answers, and you didn't have the power to fix it. But somehow, you made it through. That wasn't just willpower. That was grace holding you up when your own strength ran out. Grace steps into the moments you can't control and gives you what you need to keep moving. It's like oxygen for the soul. You don't always see it, but without it, anymore, you'd collapse under the weight of everything you're trying to carry. Now, here's the other side of it: wisdom. Grace doesn't cancel out the need to make choices anymore. It empowers you to make them without fear. Wisdom is what gives you clarity when you're standing at a crossroads. It's the inner voice that helps you separate noise from truth, impulse from intention, fear from faith. Every single day, you're faced with decisions, big ones and small ones. And if you're honest, sometimes you rush into choices out of panic or pressure, and then later you're left cleaning up the mess. Wisdom slows you down. Wisdom says, pause, pray. Anymore, look at the bigger picture. Wisdom is not just about intelligence or information. It's about alignment with God's perspective. It helps you see beyond the moment, beyond your emotions, more and beyond the pressure of what people expect from you. Grace and wisdom are inseparable, and you need both every single day. Grace steadies you in the storm, and wisdom points you toward the way out. Anymore, grace says, You are loved no matter what. Wisdom says, now here's how to walk in that love with confidence. Grace covers the places where you fall short anymore, and wisdom gives you the steps to grow stronger. Without grace, you'd be crushed by what you can't control. Without wisdom, you'd be lost in indecision or led astray by impulse. Together, anymore, they create a balance that keeps you steady and moving forward. Here's the thing. Grace reminds you that you're human, and wisdom reminds you that God is God. Grace tells you it's okay to let go of what you can't fix. Wisdom tells you what to focus on instead. Grace says, stop beating yourself up for yesterday. Wisdom says, here's how to make today better. Grace catches you when you fall, and wisdom teaches you how not to trip on the same thing again. When you really start living in this truth anymore, you stop wasting so much energy on what's out of your hands. You stop replaying the past, you stop obsessing over the future, and you start asking for grace and wisdom right here, right now, in this moment, anymore. That's where your power is. Not in controlling everything, but in receiving the strength and clarity that only God can give. Grace helps you endure the weight of what's beyond your reach anymore. And wisdom helps you steward well the choices that are in your hands. And when you lean into both, you realize you're not as powerless as you thought. You're actually guided, supported, anymore, and equipped for whatever today brings. Morning prayer is not about perfection. It's about surrendering your day to God. Too often, people think prayer has to sound a certain way anymore, that you need fancy words or a flawless routine for it to count. That mindset creates pressure, and pressure creates avoidance. You start believing that if you don't pray long enough, loud enough, or eloquently enough, then maybe it doesn't matter. But that's not what prayer was ever meant to be. Prayer is not performance, it's connection. It's not about reciting the right script. It's about opening your heart. Morning prayer is not about checking a box or impressing God. It's about starting your day with a posture that says, I can't do this on my own, and I don't want to. I need you with me. When you wake up in the morning, your mind is already racing. The notifications are waiting on your phone anymore. The to-do list is longer than you'd like to admit. Your responsibilities feel heavy before your feet even hit the floor. That's why morning prayer matters. It's the reset button. It's the intentional choice to pause and say, before I run into the chaos of this day, I'm going to center myself in God's presence. That moment doesn't have to be polished or pretty. It just has to be honest. God isn't moved by the performance of your words. He's moved by the posture of your heart. When you surrender your day in prayer, something powerful happens anymore. You shift the weight off your shoulders and place it where it belongs, on God's. You stop carrying the illusion that you're in control of everything, and you begin to rest in the truth that He is. That surrender creates peace in your mind, because you know you're not waking up to face this day alone. It creates clarity, because you're inviting wisdom into your decisions before you even make them. And it creates strength, because you're fueled not by your limited capacity, but by His unlimited grace. Too many people start their day reacting instead of leading. They wake up and immediately let the demands of life dictate their pace, their mood, and their mindset. But morning prayer flips that. It says, I'm not reacting to the world. I'm responding to God first. That one choice changes everything. You walk into your day more grounded. You handle interruptions with more patience. You make decisions with more discernment. And even when challenges come, you face them with a steadiness that doesn't come from you. It comes from the one you surrendered to at the start. And here's the thing. Surrender doesn't mean weakness anymore. It doesn't mean giving up or ignoring responsibility. It means acknowledging that your strength has limits, but God's does not. It means saying, I will do my part, but I will not carry the weight of what only you can handle. That surrender is an act of trust. It's saying, God, I believe you care about the details of my life, and I trust that you will guide me, provide for me, and protect me. That kind of surrender is where real confidence is born. Because when you release control, you actually gain freedom. The freedom to live without constant anxiety. The freedom to step into your day knowing you're covered. Morning prayer doesn't have to be long, but it has to be real. It can be as simple as, God, I give you this day. Guide me, strengthen me, and help me see you in everything I do. That's it. No script, no pressure, just surrender. And the more you practice that, the more natural it becomes. You begin to notice that you walk differently through your day. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because you're anchored in something greater than yourself. You're not striving for perfection anymore. You're resting in surrender. Clarity and peace come when you pause before reacting or deciding. Think about how many times in life you've jumped into something too quickly. Whether it was snapping at someone in anger, saying yes when you should have said no, or making a choice just because you felt pressured in the moment. And later, you look back and think, if I had just waited, if I had just taken a breath, if I had just given myself a moment to pause, I would have made a better decision. That's the power of pausing. Anymore, it creates space for clarity to rise above the noise and for peace to settle into your heart before you move forward. We live in a world that glorifies urgency. Everything is instant notifications, more instant responses, instant gratification. That pace makes you feel like if you don't act right now, you'll miss out or fall behind. But that's a lie. Rushed decisions rarely lead to peace. They usually lead to regret. Pausing is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the discipline of saying, I don't have to react immediately. I can breathe. I can listen. More, I can let God speak into this before I move. That pause might be 5 minutes. It might be an hour. It might be a day. But the point is, when you pause anymore, you give yourself the chance to align with peace instead of chaos. Clarity doesn't come when your mind is racing in 100 directions. It comes when you slow down enough to separate emotion from truth, impulse from intention, fear from faith. Sometimes what feels urgent in the moment isn't actually important at all. It's just loud. But when you pause, you start to see what truly matters more. You begin to ask different questions. Will this matter a year from now? Am I choosing out of fear or out of faith anymore? Is this decision aligned with God's wisdom or just my temporary feelings? Those questions don't surface when you're rushing. They only surface when you give yourself permission to pause. Peace, too, anymore is born in the pause. Anxiety feeds on speed. It thrives in the constant movement and noise of a busy life. But peace grows in stillness. That's why taking a moment, even a few deep breaths in prayer, can completely shift the atmosphere inside of you. Suddenly, you don't feel as frantic. Suddenly, anymore. You remember that you don't have to figure it all out in a split second. Suddenly, you realize you're not alone in this decision, and that realization itself brings calm. When you pause anymore, you also create space for God to guide you. Too often, we expect to hear His voice in the rush, but the truth is, His wisdom often whispers in the quiet. If you're always reacting, you'll miss it. But if you stop, even just for a moment, you open yourself to His direction. And that's where clarity and peace come from. Not from overthinking, not from stressing anymore, but from creating enough space for God's wisdom to break through the noise. It takes courage to pause, because people will pressure you to act fast. They'll say, come on, and more. Just decide already. Or your own thoughts will scream, hurry, or you'll lose your chance. But you have to learn to trust that what is meant for you will not pass you by. More. Pausing doesn't cost you opportunities. It protects you from mistakes. And more than that, it strengthens your confidence, because you know your choices are being made from a place of clarity, not panic. More, so the next time you feel the pressure to react instantly, choose differently. Pause, take a breath, whisper a prayer, ask for clarity, ask for peace, and watch how your perspective shifts. More, that pause may feel small, but it could be the difference between regret and relief, between chaos and calm, between making a choice you'll question and making one you can stand on with confidence. More, clarity and peace are not found in the rush, they're found in the pause. God's guidance replaces anxiety with direction and fear with faith. Anxiety thrives in the unknown. It feeds on uncertainty, on the endless what ifs, that circle in your head. What if I fail? What if this doesn't work? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I'm not enough? Left unchecked, those thoughts spiral anymore, and suddenly you're paralyzed, unable to move forward. That's what anxiety does. It keeps you stuck in fear of what might happen, instead of walking in confidence about what God can do. But here's the truth: when you lean into God's guidance, you're no longer navigating life on your own. You're no longer guessing your way through every decision. His direction cuts through the noise anymore, and His presence turns fear into trust. Think about the difference between walking into an unfamiliar place alone versus walking in with someone who knows every turn, every doorway, every shortcut. If you're alone, you feel nervous second, guessing where you're going. But if you're with someone who knows the way, you relax, because you can trust their lead. That's exactly what happens when you allow God to guide you. Life is full of unknowns, but none of it is unknown to Him. What feels like uncertainty to you is already mapped out in His plan. What feels like a dead end to you is just a detour in His eyes. And when you remember that, fear begins to lose its grip. God's guidance doesn't always come in a loud, dramatic way. Often, it shows up in quiet nudges, in the sense of peace you feel about one option, and the unrest you feel about another. Sometimes it comes through scripture that speaks directly to your situation. More or through wise counsel from someone you trust. Sometimes it's simply a conviction in your spirit that says, "This is the way, walk in it." The point is, when you're open to His direction anymore, He provides it, and the more you trust Him, the less you need to control everything yourself. That's where anxiety begins to shift into confidence. Fear is natural. It's part of being human. But fear doesn't have to control you. Fear says, "You're not ready. You'll mess this up. You don't have what it takes." Faith says, "God is with me. God equips me." Anymore, God makes a way. When you lean into God's guidance, you're choosing faith over fear, even if you don't feel fearless. Faith isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward anyway. Trusting that God's hand is steady even when yours is shaking. Anxiety thrives on the illusion that everything depends on you. Guidance replaces that illusion with truth anymore. You are not carrying this life alone. You are not responsible for knowing every outcome in advance. You are not expected to solve every problem with your limited understanding. More, God's guidance reminds you that your job is to listen, to follow, and to trust. His job is to direct your path anymore. That shift frees you from the constant pressure of, "What if I get it wrong?" Because even if you make a mistake, His grace covers you, and His wisdom can redirect you. Anymore, there's peace that comes when you know you're not wandering aimlessly. Even if you don't see the whole road ahead, you can take the next step with confidence, because you know God sees the entire map anymore. That's how guidance changes everything. It takes the weight off your shoulders, replaces anxiety with calm, and transforms fear into faith. More, you no longer live in panic about what might happen. You start living in expectation of what God will do. And that expectation fuels courage, boldness, anymore, and a steady peace that carries you through even the most uncertain days. So whenever anxiety tries to creep in, and fear starts whispering lies, stop and remind yourself you are not walking alone anymore. You are guided, you are directed, and you are covered. God's guidance is not just a concept, it's a reality. And the moment you lean into it, fear begins to fade, and faith takes its place. When you invite grace and wisdom daily, your perspective shifts, and life feels less overwhelming. Most of the stress people carry doesn't come from what's actually happening. It comes from how they see it. The same challenge that breaks one person can become the breakthrough for another anymore. The difference isn't the size of the problem, it's the perspective they bring to it. And perspective changes when you make grace and wisdom part of your daily rhythm anymore. Grace reminds you that you are not defined by your mistakes, that you don't need to be perfect, that God's strength is available in your weakness. Wisdom reminds you that you're not walking blind anymore, that you have divine guidance available for every decision and every step. Together, they create a lens that changes how you see life, and when your vision changes, everything else changes too anymore. Inviting grace every day means you wake up with the understanding that you don't have to earn God's love or approval. You start your day knowing you're already enough. Not because you've done everything right, but because He's already covered what you can't. That truth lifts the weight of shame, guilt, and constant striving. It frees you from the exhausting need to prove yourself, and instead allows you to move through your day with peace, Grace shifts your focus from your failures to God's faithfulness anymore. Suddenly, the things that used to crush you don't feel as heavy, because you know you're not carrying them alone. Wisdom, on the other hand, sharpens your focus. When you invite wisdom more, you stop living in reaction mode, bouncing from one crisis to another. Wisdom helps you step back and ask better questions. What truly matters here? What will bring peace, not just in this moment, but long term? Is this choice aligned with the person I want to become? Wisdom protects you from impulsive decisions that lead to regret anymore, and it empowers you to make choices that bring clarity and direction. When you seek wisdom daily, you stop stumbling blindly and start walking with intention. Here's the powerful part. And more, when grace and wisdom work together, life stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like a journey with purpose. Grace quiets the voice of shame, and wisdom quiets the voice of confusion. Grace says, anymore. You are covered. Wisdom says, here's the next step. Grace softens your heart so you don't become bitter, while wisdom strengthens your mind so you don't become careless anymore. And when you combine those two, what used to overwhelm you now becomes manageable. You don't panic in the face of obstacles, because grace reminds you that even if you stumble, you won't fall apart more. You don't freeze when faced with tough decisions, because wisdom reminds you that you're not choosing alone. You're being guided. Perspective is everything. Without grace, you see life as an endless cycle of failure and not enough. Without wisdom, you see life as a confusing maze you'll never figure out. But when you invite both, your perspective shifts to hope, to clarity, anymore to strength. You start seeing challenges as opportunities to grow, setbacks as setups for something greater, and daily responsibilities not as burdens, but as places where God is present with you anymore. That doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means you become equipped to handle it with a peace and confidence that the world can't explain anymore. Overwhelm happens when you feel like everything is on your shoulders. But when you start every day with grace and wisdom, you remember that you're not carrying this alone. You begin to notice blessings you used to overlook. You start to walk into situations that once triggered fear with a calmness you didn't know you had. You approach problems not with dread but with trust anymore, because you believe there's a solution you'll be shown when the time is right. Daily grace and wisdom don't change the fact that storms come, but they absolutely change how you weather them anymore. They lift your eyes above the chaos so you can see the bigger picture. They remind you that every day is not something to survive, but an opportunity to experience God's presence guiding and sustaining you anymore. And when that becomes your perspective, life doesn't feel like a constant battle anymore. It feels like a journey you're empowered to walk, one step at a time. At the end of the day, everything comes back to this. You don't have to carry life on your own, and you were never meant to. Grace gives you the strength for what you cannot control. Wisdom gives you the clarity to make the decisions you can, and prayer anchors it all in surrender. When you pause before reacting, you create space for peace and clarity to guide you. When you follow God's direction, anxiety loses its grip and fear turns into faith. And when you invite grace and wisdom daily, your entire perspective shifts. You stop living in overwhelm and start living with purpose, confidence, and peace. This is not about living a perfect life. It's about living a guided one anymore. Every morning you wake up, you have a choice: you step into the day carrying the weight of fear, doubt, and pressure, or step into it anchored by grace, led by wisdom, and strengthened by faith. One choice leaves you exhausted, the other leaves you empowered. And that's the invitation today. So, as you walk out of here, don't let the noise of life dictate how you live. Don't let anxiety steal your peace or fear silence your faith. Instead, surrender your day. Ask for grace. Ask for wisdom. Pause long enough to listen. Then step forward boldly, knowing you are not alone anymore. You are guided, and you are equipped. Because when you live from that place, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that can stop you from walking in the life God has already prepared for you.